All right, so we're going to look into this research on coconut oil you sent over.
Okay.
You're interested in how it affects your heart,
Yeah,
especially cholesterol and just overall heart health, right?
exactly. And you gave me a great place to start with this paper.
Okay.
It's from Nutrients from 2025,
Okay.
and it's titled Analysis of 26 Studies of the Impact of Coconut Oil on Lipid Parameters Beyond Total and LDL Cholesterol.
Oh, I like that title already. Beyond total and LDL cholesterol.
Yeah.
It seems like we're going to go a little deeper than usual.
This paper is really interesting.
Yeah.
It challenges the idea that all saturated fat is the same,
Okay.
and it really dives into what makes coconut oil unique,
All right.
which is its high concentration of medium-chain fatty acids, or MCFAs.
Now, I've heard of those, but to be honest, I'm a little fuzzy on what makes them different.
Yeah, you're not alone.
Yeah.
A lot of people are.
Okay.
Basically, most saturated fats we hear about,
Mm-hmm.
like in animal products or palm oil,
Right.
those are mostly made up of long-chain fatty acids.
Okay.
But coconut oil, on the other hand,
Okay.
is packed with these MCFAs,
Yeah.
particularly one called lauric acid.
So it's like different types of fuel for our bodies.
Exactly. And the research suggests that lauric acid,
Yep.
which is the main type of saturated fat in coconut oil,
Mm-hmm.
it's processed by the body differently than those long-chain fatty acids.
Interesting.
You might even say it's a more efficient
Yeah.
fuel
Oh.
that doesn't stick around and cause as much trouble.
So coconut oil is getting a bad rap just because it's lumped in with other saturated fats?
That seems to be a key takeaway from this paper.
Okay.
Coconut oil has been portrayed as a villain for years,
Right.
but the science just doesn't back that up.
Yeah.
Especially when you look at this analysis of 26 different studies.
Speaking of those studies, what did they actually show about coconut oil's effect on cholesterol levels?
Well, the results for total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol,
Okay.
which is what we often call the bad cholesterol,
All right.
they were mixed. Some studies showed increases, some showed decreases, and some no change at all.
Interesting.
But here's the thing.
Okay.
Across all 26 studies, there was one consistent finding.
Okay, what's that?
Coconut oil increased HDL cholesterol,
Ah.
what we call the good cholesterol.
So even though the effect on total and LDL cholesterol wasn't clear-cut, coconut oil consistently boosted the good stuff.
That's a great way to put it.
That's a pretty important point.
It is, and there's another interesting trend.
Okay.
Most studies showed a decrease in triglycerides,
Mm-hmm.
which is another positive sign when it comes to heart health.
Okay, so that's good news for coconut oil, but I have to admit, when I hear about all these different types of cholesterol, I get a little lost.
Sure.
Is it just about keeping all the numbers low?
That's where things get a little more nuanced.
Okay.
It's not just about individual cholesterol numbers,
Yeah.
but about the ratios between them.
Ratios, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
Think of it this way.
Okay.
Your cholesterol numbers are like ingredients in a recipe. The ratios tell you how much of each ingredient you're using and how they all work together.
Got it.
Some ratios are better for heart health than others.
So it's about balance, not just lowering everything across the board.
Exactly. And that's where coconut oil gets really interesting.
Okay.
The paper found that consuming coconut oil actually led to improvements in these key cholesterol ratios.
Okay.
In other words, it helped to create a healthier balance,
Mm-hmm.
which is a good sign for your heart.
Now that's a takeaway I can really appreciate.
Good.
But before we get too carried away, I'm curious about something. Did everyone in these studies respond to coconut oil the same way?
That's a great question, and it highlights a crucial point.
Okay.
There's no one-size-fits-all answer.
Right.
The study showed a pretty wide range in how individuals responded to coconut oil.
Mm-hmm.
Some people saw bigger changes in their cholesterol levels than others.
So what you're saying is, even though this research is promising, it's not a guarantee that coconut oil will have the same effect on everyone?
Precisely, human metabolism is incredibly complex.
Wow.
And we all have unique genetics and lifestyles that can influence how our bodies process things.
Mm-hmm.
This is where working with a healthcare provider or a registered dietitian can be really valuable.
Okay.
They can help you personalize your diet and monitor your cholesterol levels to see how your body is responding.
Personalized medicine, I love that approach.
Yeah,
It's about understanding your own individual needs and making informed choices, right?
absolutely.
Yeah.
And this paper really highlights the need for that personalized approach,
Yeah.
especially when it comes to something like coconut oil,
Right.
which seems to affect people differently.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground already.
Yeah, we have.
And it's clear that the science on coconut oil is more nuanced than I initially thought.
Yeah, for sure.
But we're not done yet.
Yep.
The paper also discusses some longer-term studies, right?
Yes, it does. And that's where we really start to see the potential long-term implications of incorporating coconut oil into your diet. There was a 2-year study included in the analysis that looked at individuals with existing coronary artery disease,
Okay.
comparing those consuming coconut oil versus sunflower oil.
2 years. That's a pretty significant study.
It is.
What did they find out?
Well, the results were pretty remarkable.
Okay.
They found no difference in cardiovascular events,
Okay.
like heart attacks or strokes between the two groups.
So even over a long period, coconut oil didn't lead to worse heart outcomes.
Right. It didn't seem to have a negative impact.
Wow, that really challenges the idea that coconut oil is inherently harmful to the heart. It's like we're rewriting the rules here.
It's definitely shifting the narrative. And there's more.
Okay, there's more.
The paper even mentions 2 large population studies
Okay.
in Kerala, India,
Oh, yeah.
where coconut oil has been a dietary staple for generations.
I've heard about Kerala. They're known for their beautiful beaches and their love of coconuts.
Exactly. And those studies also support the idea that coconut oil isn't linked to an increased risk of heart disease, even when it's consumed regularly over long periods.
So we've got this analysis of 26 studies, plus these long-term studies and population studies. It's starting to feel like the evidence is really stacking up in favor of coconut oil.
I'd say so. It makes you wonder, how did we get this idea that all saturated fat is bad in the first place?
That's a great question. I know there's been a lot of back and forth about saturated fat over the years. Can you give us a little history lesson?
Of course, this idea that saturated fat is bad for your heart really gained traction in the mid-20th century.
Okay.
But it turns out there were some flaws in the studies.
Flaws. Now that's intriguing. I always love a good scientific detective story. Tell me more.
Well, for starters, a lot of those early studies didn't properly account for the presence of trans fats.
Ah, yes. Trans fats, the real villains. I remember when everyone started realizing how bad those are for you.
Exactly. But back in the day, trans fats were often lumped in with saturated fats because they're both solid at room temperature.
Okay.
This really skewed the results of a lot of the research. That was trying to figure out the effects of saturated fat on its own.
So coconut oil and other natural saturated fats were basically guilty by association.
It seems that way.
Yeah.
And to make matters worse, some of the studies that focused on replacing saturated fats with polyunsaturated fats, specifically those high in something called linoleic acid.
Oh, okay.
They didn't actually have the positive outcomes that were expected.
Wait, isn't that what the dietary guidelines for Americans have been telling us for years, to replace saturated fats with unsaturated fats?
They have. But here's the kicker.
Okay.
2 really large long-term studies that actually tested the effects of high linoleic acid consumption found that it significantly increased the risk of death from all causes,
Oh, wow.
including heart disease.
So it's not as simple as just swapping out saturated fats for polyunsaturated fats.
It's definitely more complicated than that.
Okay.
And get this, those 2 studies, which were completed in 1973,
Oh my God.
weren't widely known before the first dietary guidelines were published in 1980.
So the guidelines were created without taking into account those important findings.
That's right. And since then, there haven't been any other large long-term studies
Wow.
looking at whether consuming natural saturated fat like the kind found in coconut oil actually leads to a higher risk of heart disease compared to those high linoleic acid oils.
So we're still missing a lot of the long-term data, especially when it comes to coconut oil specifically.
And that's one of the limitations of this whole area of research.
Right.
But this paper we're discussing, by analyzing 26 different studies,
Yeah,
some of which lasted up to 2 years, starts to fill in some of those gaps.
that makes sense. So while the research on coconut oil is promising, there's still more to learn about its long-term effects. Now, I want to go back to something you mentioned earlier, individual variability. Not everyone responds to coconut oil the same way, right?
You're right on the money.
Yeah.
The paper found a lot of variation in how people's cholesterol levels changed after they started eating coconut oil.
Yeah.
Some people saw increases in total cholesterol and LDL cholesterol, while others saw decreases, and some didn't see any change at all.
Why is there so much variation? Is it genetics, diet, lifestyle?
It's probably a combination of all of those things,
Right.
plus a whole bunch of other factors we don't even know about yet.
Yeah.
Human metabolism is incredibly complex,
Yeah.
and we're still trying to figure out all the variables that influence how our bodies process different fats.
This whole conversation really reinforces how important personalized nutrition is. It's not about following a one-size-fits-all diet, but about figuring out what works best for your own unique body.
I completely agree.
Mm.
And that's where working with a healthcare provider or a registered dietitian who understands your individual needs and health history can be so valuable.
Hmm.
They can help you personalize your diet and monitor how your body responds.
Okay, before we move on, I want to circle back to those cholesterol ratios we were talking about earlier. You said they're really important for understanding heart health risks.
Hmm.
Can you remind us why?
Sure. Think of it like this. Your total cholesterol number is like knowing how much money you have in all your different bank accounts combined.
Okay.
But the ratios tell you how that money is distributed.
Okay.
You might have a lot of money overall, but if most of it is in a savings account earning interest, that's better than having it all in a checking account where you're more likely to spend it.
I love that analogy. So it's not just about the total amount of cholesterol, but also about how it's being used or stored in the body.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And the research on coconut oil shows that it can actually improve those ratios, which is a good sign for your heart.
That's great news. But I'm also wondering, are there other things besides cholesterol that we need to be thinking about when it comes to heart health?
That's a great question. This paper goes beyond just cholesterol and looks at other factors that contribute to heart health, like something called apolipoproteins.
Okay, now we're getting into the technical stuff.
Yeah.
What are apolipoproteins and why are they important?
Imagine apolipoproteins as little delivery trucks
Okay.
that carry cholesterol around your bloodstream. There are different types of these trucks,
Okay.
and some are better at delivering cholesterol to the right places than others.
So it's not just about how much cholesterol you have, but also about how it's being transported throughout your body.
Right. And the research suggests that coconut oil might actually increase the number of those good delivery trucks, which is another point in its favor.
Okay, that makes sense. What else did this paper look at?
It also talked about something called antioxidant status.
I know antioxidants are good for us, but I'm not sure how they relate to heart health.
Think of antioxidants as little superheroes
Okay.
that fight off free radicals.
Okay.
Free radicals are like little villains that can damage your cells and contribute to heart disease.
So antioxidants are like our heart's personal bodyguards.
Exactly. And some studies suggest that coconut oil, especially virgin coconut oil, may have antioxidant properties, which could be another way it protects our hearts.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Did the paper cover anything else?
Yes, it also mentioned endothelial function.
Endothelial function. Now that one sounds really complicated.
But it's not as scary as it sounds. The endothelium is basically the lining of your blood vessels. Think of it like the smooth inner surface of a pipe.
Okay.
If the lining of the pipe gets rough or damaged, it's harder for things to flow through smoothly.
So healthy endothelial function means healthy blood vessels.
Exactly. And healthy blood vessels are crucial for preventing heart disease. Some research suggests that coconut oil might actually improve endothelial function, but we need more studies to confirm that.
Okay. I'm seeing a pattern here. There's a lot of promising research on coconut oil, but we still need more studies to really understand how it works and what its long-term effects are.
You're picking up on a key theme.
Yeah.
But even with those limitations, this paper is definitely challenging those old simplistic ideas about saturated fat.
It definitely feels like we're moving away from those black and white rules and toward a more nuanced understanding of how different fats affect our bodies. But before we wrap up this part of our deep dive, there are two more big topics I want to touch on: obesity and abdominal adiposity.
Those are definitely important topics, especially when it comes to heart health. It's no secret that carrying extra weight, especially around the belly, increases your risk of heart disease.
Exactly. But what's surprising to me is that the paper actually found that incorporating coconut oil into the diet didn't lead to weight gain. In fact, some studies even showed that coconut oil might help with weight loss.
I know, right? It seems counterintuitive given that coconut oil is a fat.
Totally. I think most people assume that eating fat will make you fat, but it's clearly not that simple.
It all comes back to those medium-chain fatty acids, or MCFAs, we talked about earlier. Some research suggests that they might boost your metabolism and help you feel fuller for longer, which could lead to eating less overall.
So coconut oil might not only be good for our hearts, but it might also help us manage our weight. That's a pretty amazing combo.
It's definitely an intriguing possibility, but we need more research to understand the long-term effects on weight management.
Well, this has been a fascinating exploration of the science behind coconut oil. It seems like this once demonized fat might actually have a lot of redeeming qualities.
I agree. This paper provides a much more balanced and comprehensive view of coconut oil and its potential role in a healthy diet.
But it's also important to remember that nutrition is a complex and evolving field. We need to stay open to new information and be willing to adapt our dietary choices as the science progresses.
Absolutely. And we should always consult with our healthcare providers to make sure we're making choices that are right for our individual needs.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive, but there's still more to explore. In part 3, we'll discuss the big picture implications of all these findings and what it all means for you and your dietary choices. Welcome back to our deep dive on coconut oil.
Yeah, it's been a fascinating discussion.
It has. Now, where do we go from here? What does all this research mean for someone like me who's trying to make healthy choices?
Well, that's the million-dollar question.
Yeah.
This paper gives us a lot to think about.
Right.
But, it's just one piece of the puzzle.
Mm.
It doesn't mean we should all start eating coconut oil by the spoonful.
Right. Balance and moderation are always key, especially with something like coconut oil. It seems to have such a wide range of effects on people.
Yeah, and this research really highlights the importance of personalized nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
What works for one person might not work for another.
Right.
It all comes down to your individual genetics, your lifestyle, and your overall health goals.
So if I'm thinking about adding more coconut oil to my diet, the first step would be to talk to my doctor or a registered dietitian to see if it's right for me.
Absolutely. They can help you assess your individual needs and risks,
Okay,
and they can monitor your cholesterol levels to see how your body responds.
that makes sense. Now I want to zoom out a little
Sure.
and talk about the big picture implications of this research.
Sure.
It feels like it's really shaking things up in the world of nutrition science.
It is.
Yeah.
For years we've been told to avoid saturated fat.
Right.
But this paper presents a very different perspective. It suggests that coconut oil, with its unique type of saturated fat, might not be as harmful as we once thought.
Yeah.
In fact, it might even offer some benefits.
That's a pretty big deal. It makes me wonder if we need to rethink our entire approach to dietary fat.
I think that's a conversation worth having.
Yeah.
This research definitely challenges some of our long-held assumptions.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds us that nutrition science is constantly evolving, and we need to be open to new discoveries.
That's so true. It's like we're constantly learning and unlearning things about food and health.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to stay curious and informed. Read research papers, listen to podcasts like this one,
Right.
and talk to your healthcare providers to stay up to date on the latest scientific findings.
Okay, so we've talked about personalized nutrition. We've talked about the evolving science of dietary fat.
Mm-hmm.
But there's one more thing I want to bring up before we wrap up this deep dive.
Okay.
We've been focusing a lot on the potential health benefits of coconut oil.
Yeah.
But what about its sustainability?
That's a crucial question.
Yeah.
Food choices are about more than just our individual health. They also have an impact on the environment and the people who grow and produce our food.
Right. I know that coconut oil production has been linked to some environmental concerns like deforestation and habitat loss.
Exactly. And there are also social and economic factors to consider, like fair labor practices and the impact on local communities.
So even if coconut oil turns out to be a heart-healthy choice, we need to make sure it's also a sustainable choice.
Absolutely. We need to look at the whole picture and weigh the potential benefits against the potential risks.
Well, this deep dive has given me a lot to think about. It's clear that coconut oil is a complex and fascinating food with both potential benefits and potential drawbacks.
I agree. It's not a simple yes or no answer.
Right.
It's about making informed choices based on the best available evidence and your own personal values.
Well said. So, to our listeners out there, we
Yeah.
encourage you to keep learning, stay curious, and make food choices that align with your health goals and your commitment to a sustainable future.
And remember, knowledge is power.
Yes.
The more you understand about the food you eat, the better equipped you'll be to make decisions that support your overall well-being.
That's a wrap on our coconut oil deep dive. We hope you found it informative and thought-provoking. Until next time, happy exploring.